Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Reesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all ages, backgrounds, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Kevin Palmieri, CFO, founder, and co-host of Next Level University. Please enjoy Kevin Palmieri. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I am here with Kevin Palmieri, CFO, founder, and co-host of Next Level University. Welcome to the podcast.
Mari, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat, and I recognize from your energy that this is going to be a wonderful chat.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you so much for saying yes to coming and joining me for this episode. I'm super excited to dive into creative adventures and creativity. But before we get there, why don't you take a couple of minutes and just let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So you did a wonderful job of introducing me. So it's very much that. I'm Kevin Palmieri. I created a podcast 5 years ago called the Hyperconscious Podcast. We kept growing, we changed, we rebranded, and now I have a podcast where we drop an episode every single day. We have 1,125 episodes, listeners in 125 countries, and I think we just crossed 675,000 downloads. So that's really what I do the majority of the time. I am either speaking into this microphone on a podcast, somebody else's podcast, or coaching podcasters. So what at one point was just a fantasy and a dream of mine has now, I won't say has become a reality. We worked really hard to make it a reality, but I'm very, very grateful. And that's why I try to remain energetic and positive, because I'm very blessed to be doing what I'm doing.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Congratulations
Thank you so
on
much.
continuing to grow and all of the countries and the listeners and the downloads. It's amazing. So that's awesome. And thank you for putting all of this information and content out into the world. I mean, what a gift to be able to do that. And it's no joke to do something every day. Like that consistency, how, I guess my first question for you is like, what was that decision to do something every day versus, not every day?
Yeah, it's interesting. We started with one episode a week, just like everybody else. And I think it just got to the point where we're based on impact. So we want to have the most impact humanly possible, and we want to add the most value humanly possible. So it was like, well, there's 7 days a week. We're going to have to do 7 episodes. If somebody creates an 8th day, we're going to end up doing another episode. So I really think for us, it seems wild and it seems crazy, but for us, it's based on the goal of having the most successful podcast in the self-improvement industry. And all the shows that are the most successful do 7 episodes a week. So for us, it's like the earlier we can do that, the better off we're going to be in the long run.
Yeah. Well, props to you all for doing it, because I know it is not easy.
No, it's a lot. I have 2 episodes to record after this. We already did one today. So it's a lot. But again, at one point, I was trying to figure out how to do this. So I'm very grateful that I get to.
Wonderful. Well, I'm super excited to talk more about podcast and creativity, but I'm really curious, when you think about creativity and being creative, what does it mean to you to be creative?
I was thinking of that before we chatted, and I had that moment of, I don't know if I'm creative, but I think for me, it's either taking something from nothing or taking something deeper than you already understand it. So I was thinking to myself, as a podcaster, there's like, it's not just recording an episode. There's so much that goes into it. There's the title, there's the through line, there's the story, there's the example. So yeah, I think for me, it's really taking something and then bringing it to a deeper level, to a deeper level, to a deeper level, because I think you have to be very creative to make sure it actually happens in that way.
Absolutely. I love what you were saying about like taking it to that deeper and deeper
Mm,
level. I mean, as soon as you said that word deep, it
mm,
made me think of like vulnerability and
mm,
how challenging vulnerability can be, but how important it is not only to, personal development, personal growth, but also to creativity. Like we
mm.
can't really have creative expression if we're not willing to go deep and be
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah.
So
It's
thanks
it's
for
scary. It's
it
scary to
is.
be creative because you take your creativity very personally because it's
Mhm.
yours. It's yours and yours alone. And
Right.
I think that's what people are afraid to get judged for. Like this is the darkest, I don't want to say darkest, the deepest part of me. If somebody doesn't like it, what does that mean about me as a human?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the comparisons that happen
Yeah.
and all of that. Do you find that kind of being in the world of podcasting, and it is a creative industry,
Mm.
that early on you compared yourself to others, or what was that
Yeah.
experience for you?
Yeah, it's very interesting because in the beginning, I was just trying to figure out how to survive as a podcaster. And I think I was comparing myself to people, but I was only comparing to what you can see. And
Mm,
all that is like the interview and what they're talking about. This
right.
is the interesting thing, Mari. The creativity that's really valuable in the podcast industry is what nobody else sees.
Mm,
There is a
mhm.
giant business that no 99.9% of people will never see behind this microphone and behind this studio. And there's a lot of creativity there. Like, how do you make money? How do you do that? So in the beginning, I definitely was.
Yeah.
And then I had this understanding that we actually have a very, very concise, aligned business that everything's going to catch up. If we just
Mhm.
keep doing episodes, everything's going to be completely fine because we have that creative piece that a lot of people don't yet.
Yeah. Nice.
Mm.
I love it. I mean, I imagine you in your life, but also in your job, come up against some challenges and creative challenges. What are some of the creative challenges that you have faced, and how do you face them?
That is a great question. One of the most challenging things I do is I come up with all the episodes. So I come up with 7 episodes and I title them all. And it's always from the frame for me of what's going to be the best for the audience. It's
Mm.
not what do I want to talk about necessarily. I mean, I love talking about self improvement, but it's how do I connect the fact that I was on a podcast with Mari and we talked about this? How do I connect that story to a lesson that will bring value to our listeners? And then how do I deliver it in a concise, valuable way that they will leave knowing something they didn't arrive with? That's probably the most creative thing I do. But honestly, this is another thing too. I also love rapping. And it's not something I do as much as I used to because I don't have that much time. But
Oh,
that's another piece of me that's very creative where I can kind of let that out. And
yeah.
then my other passion is mixed martial arts. So
Oh,
there's something about the way you can move your body when you're throwing punches that's also very creative too. So it's
yeah.
interesting now that we're talking about creativity, I realize how much it goes into everything.
It totally does. And
Mm.
I love these moments when people are like, "Oh, I'm way more creative than I
Right?
thought," or "I
Yeah.
use more creativity in so many things."
Mm.
That's amazing. And it makes sense that, having to generate so many quote unquote creative content ideas, 7 episodes a week, and making sure that the content is valuable to
Mm.
the people who are listening. I'm curious what happens for you when you have blocks, or like what are the things that you do to move through blocks when you like can't think of seven
Yeah.
episodes or 7 topics to cover.
I often look back at old episodes. I
Mm,
mean, we have a Rolodex. So I look back and say, okay, what were we talking about 3 years from today? Like, where were we as humans in our evolution? What was
yeah.
going on in my life? That's one of the ways. But now I've just tried to be way more proactive, creatively. It's a tough word,
Yes.
where I try to go into every interaction, every conversation, every experience with the thought of what can I take away from this?
Mm,
So
mhm.
I realized very quickly that if I have to just come up with 7 things on a Sunday, I am in trouble because
Right.
then I'm going to be all over the place. But So Monday I think we recorded 2 or 3 episodes. We're supposed to do 7, but we very rarely get through it because there's other things going on. But
Yeah.
I already had a list of 4 things that I was like, these are really good stories. These will land as episodes, but that was based on my experiences of last week. So I try to do it proactively, because if I don't, it's a lot and I'm afraid they won't be valuable. I'm afraid
Yeah.
if I just have to create something from thin air, it's going to be surface level, not a good story. There's not going to be a lot of emotion behind it, and that it won't land probably.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, hearing you continually say that story aspect, there's so much creativity that goes into that. And telling stories, I'm curious, like as a kid, were you a storyteller, or like what's your earliest memory of being creative?
No, my earliest memory of being creative, I remember I wrote a poem.
Oh.
I don't remember the whole thing, but it was roses are red, violets are blue. You're not Chicken Little, the sky won't fall down on you, or something like that. That was like the beginning of it. But
That's
even
amazing.
that, right? Even that for me is like, oh, it makes sense why I love rapping, because I like taking words and then connecting them to other words and then making them the same syllables, to the point where I have my wife doing it now, and it's the funniest thing in the world. We will have a beat from a song. So like just any song.
Yeah.
We're playing that in our head, and we'll just make up our own song. But I've gotten to the point with her where she can literally do like the syllables of the other. It's weird, but she just listens to me do it and probably is sick of it at this point. But now we joke about how I'm like, babe, that was awesome. You just crushed it. You did a really, really good job of lining up the syllables. And yeah, so that makes a lot more sense to me now. Chicken Little.
Chicken Little. I love it. I love hearing these like early creative
Yeah.
experiences and expressions, because then you see kind of that through line and how people are still using that today,
Mhm.
whether they realize it or not.
Mm.
So I love it.
I
That's
do now
awesome.
because of you. Because of you, I remember that poem. I have not thought of that in years, so I appreciate
Oh, well, you're welcome. You can
it.
now come back to it, tell a deeper story about the creating of it.
That well, now I know. Now I know where it originated from, so I can.
Yeah. Ah, I love when creativity sparks lit, experiences that we have and how it can lead to other ideas and other creations. I mean, you strike me as someone who is easily inspired by things, things that happen in your life, things that you see, but like right here, right now, who or what inspires you?
Who or what inspires me? Honestly, the fact that I get the opportunity to impact people,
Mm.
I don't know if that'll ever fully land, because for me, I'm just a kid who grew up in a very small town. My friends and I joked about the fact that I'd be the one who ended up in jail. I didn't go to college, didn't grow up with a lot of money. My future wasn't necessarily bright, and it definitely wasn't this. So
Mhm.
I feel very inspired, but I also feel the responsibility. It's a pressure
Sure.
that it's my job to be the best man I can be. Like that really does inspire me, that in the grand scheme of things, that matters almost more than everything else. And that inspires me. That inspires me that your character can have such an impact on everybody you meet, and that's very important to me.
Hmm. That's amazing. I mean, I love the story that no one thought you'd be doing what you're doing.
I
And
didn't either, so I
yeah,
can't I cannot necessarily blame them. I didn't believe this was possible either.
but that's so like kind of sweet to, experience. We have that experience of, oh, that's never going to be me, and
Yeah.
then it is. So I think that's awesome to find inspiration from it, and also know that you're so much bigger than ideas that we had
Yeah.
as teenagers or young adults as well.
And there's something about seeing the impact that's really inspiring to
Mm.
me too, that I get to I have the perspective of somebody who 3 years ago wasn't quote unquote smart enough to go back to college, who graduated with a 3.8, went on to get their dream job and moved across the country,
Mm-hmm.
based on the fact that we were there to support them and they were there doing the hard work. There's something about that's
Mm.
when times get hard, there's a lot of proof to look at that what we're doing matters. And I'm
Yeah.
very grateful for that. And that's very, very inspiring to me as well.
Oh, I bet. I mean,
Mhm.
hearing. stories like that. I'm sure you have so many that people have
There's a
shared
lot.
with you.
There's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what a gift to be the holder of stories to inspire others, but also in return continue to be
Yeah.
inspired.
Very blessed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to think about kind of everyday life, maybe not work, but just like the everyday experiences we have, what are some everyday issues that you have had to use creativity to solve?
Time and lack
So
thereof.
fast.
I really had to say, okay, this is my analogy. I
Hmm.
have on my checklist of things to do, I think I have 29 habits or something that I do every day. I try
Hmm.
to do every day. I don't get 100% every day, but I think of it as a giant Tetris game of track finances. Okay, when can I fit that in my day? The gym, when can I fit that? For me, it really is, I have 5 minutes. What can I do on this list that only takes 5 minutes before my next interview? And
Hmm.
then that. So it really is a giant Tetris game of how do I get all of this done?
Hmm.
Is it 3 hours in the morning and then an hour later? Is it, how do you get it all done? It's stressful for sure, but it also is. It does require creativity to say, okay, this is what your day looks like. This is how we're going to reverse engineer it. It's not
Hmm.
as fun and exciting as maybe, painting some sort of portrait, but it's a giant Tetris game. If you don't know what Tetris is, you might have to Google it and
Yeah.
maybe it'll make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like so much problem solving,
It's a
just
lot.
like constant problem solving of
Yeah.
how to get it all in or how to do the things that you definitely need to do today versus things that maybe aren't as
Yeah.
needed in those days.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of my own thinking around kind of like well-being and keeping your creativity cup full.
Mm.
Do you have things in your life that you do that keep your kind of well-being cup full or creative cup full?
Hmm. I try to get a minimum of like a half hour of R&R every
Mm.
day. And I'm usually pretty good at that. I'm pretty good at getting my R&R because I love it and I need it as a human
Yeah.
being. That's one way. I don't know. For me, I like listening to music
Mm.
late at night on a Saturday.
Hmm.
There's something about a certain beat that puts me into a weird, not a bad energy, but an energy of creativity where I start thinking of things.
Hmm.
That's definitely something. And then honestly, I'll be very transparent. When I partake in marijuana, I get very creative.
Yeah.
It's not super often, maybe like once on the weekend,
Hmm.
but I don't even know how to explain it. I'll watch Shark Tank and everything makes more sense and it's weird.
Oh,
But yeah, that's something that's really really helped me with creativity and
yeah.
even like when I'm writing music, that it's different. It's
Mm-hmm.
different. I'm never under the influence on the podcast, but it's kind of like a R&R thing maybe on a Saturday night when I'm watching fights.
Nice. I love it. I like hearing how people attend to their creativity and make
Mm,
sure that it's, they're continuing to build it so that they can continue to create things and
yeah.
put them out into the world.
Mm,
Well, I imagine doing podcast episodes and the number of people that you interface with that you probably come across people who don't think they're creative or
mm.
even yourself earlier today, but how would you encourage others who maybe don't feel as creative to find creativity in their life?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think a good process or a good place for reflection would be how many things make a ton of sense to you that don't make any sense to somebody else. The
Mm.
reason it makes a lot of sense to you and probably not somebody else is maybe you're more creative in that aspect of it. I think that would be a good place to start. And I connect that. Remember AOL Instant Messenger? Did you ever use AIM back in the day?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
So again, another thing you might have to Google if you're younger. That's yeah, that I'm dating myself. But I
You're
remember
dating both of us. Like,
I remember I had a friend and him and I were this is where I really started to understand the rap thing.
mm,
We were doing words that rhymed. So
mm,
I would say Matt and he would say cat. And I would say car and he would say far. And then I started doing like, alignment
mm,
and he couldn't rhyme anything with that. And I was like, there's a bunch. Like there's assignment, there's define it, And I kept going, and I was getting to the point where I was doing like a bunch of syllables, and it was like, oh, this is actually kind of easy for me.
Oh,
You can't do that. I didn't know. I didn't realize that in this arena, maybe I'm more creative. And I think that's a good example of the odds are you are way more creative in 99% of things than, well, maybe not 99%, but you're way more creative in something than I am in something, for sure.
yeah.
100%. It's just a matter of finding it.
I love that. I mean, what a great tip, and what a great way to start thinking about how to incorporate creativity into your life. Finding those topics or those things that you are really good at, or that you really enjoy doing and that come really easily to you. And I love this syllable thing. Like, as you were talking, I was like, oh, can I do that?
I believe in you.
I believe in me too. On some level, I can definitely find some ways. I mean, it's been such a treat to chat with you. I just have one last question.
Sure.
What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
It feels, it's two things at the same time. One is an openness and kind of like a connection of, I know this is right. I don't know how to explain it. I couldn't write a thesis on how I know this is right, but I'm certain it is. My intuition knows. And then there's also like a closing of, now lock up that idea and make sure it stays there. So it's an opening to allow it. I think of it as like a chamber. Chamber opens, it goes up to the next part, and then the chamber closes behind it, and there it lives. So yeah, I don't know if that's a feeling, but that's what it is.
Sure. I mean, images can invoke feelings and experiences.
Yeah, that's true.
So why not? And I mean,
That's what I'm going with.
Experience. So I love it. I love how different everyone's experience of what it feels like to be creative, and the images and the words that come along with it. So thank you very much for sharing that. And
my pleasure.
Chatting about creativity. And if people want to listen to your podcast or hear about other things that you're up to, how could they go about doing that?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Our show is Next Level University. We're on all the major podcast platforms as well as YouTube. And then if you ever have any questions, you ever want to chat, my handle on Instagram is @NeverQuitKid. And I will send you a video. If you send me a message, I will most likely send you an audio or a video back. That's just the way I am. I like audio messages and video messages.
That's amazing. Well, thank you again for chatting. It's been such a treat. And yeah, this has been awesome.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are @Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.